But let's get into our lesson this evening. The passage that was read for us is really the basis of our text for the lesson today, warning us regarding how we use our tongues. These lessons, and I'm not going to go through all the same introduction I did this morning. I'd encourage you to, if you weren't here, go and read James chapter 3, verses 1 through 12, and notice the warning that's being given. We have a choice in how we can use our words. I asked my wife this afternoon, I said, well, did the PowerPoint picture make sense, all the letters, the idea of putting together for words, searching how we use them? She said, I didn't even notice. I said, well, I guess it didn't work too well. But that's what that was supposed to be about, because we have a choice in how we use our words. We can search for the right words at the right occasion. We can search for using them in a positive, righteous, encouraging way, or we can choose to use words that are negative, unrighteous, and in ways that are displeasing to God. It's our choice. We've got to decide that we want to use them pleasing to God. The sermons like this are the hardest to preach. Easiest, but the hardest. I appreciate your encouraging words after the lesson this morning, and that you received it with humility. And I would like to believe that I probably stepped on a lot of our toes, myself included, but that's what makes it hard to preach. It's a simple lesson. It's there in the text. It's not anything that most of us don't already know. I'm not saying things that are new to the majority of us. But as one was pointing out this afternoon, as Peter would say, I put these things in your remembrance. No matter how long we've been a Christian, no matter how old we are, sometimes we just need to be reminded. And when we are reminded and we're truthful and we look to ourselves, I believe we can all do better. And that's what makes it hard, because I go back and Amanda, my wife, told me, she said, well, you just preached all over me today, talking about herself. And I said, well, me too. And so we discussed, how can I take this lesson and do better? And there are some things I started to say this afternoon. I just clamped my mouth shut, and I kept it shut because, well, I don't want to be a hypocrite saying one thing and doing another. So I hope that as we discuss 17 sins of the tongue, that this lesson will help you decide to tame it the best you can, even though the tongue can never be truly tamed, but that you can control your tongue to use it in a positive way, not in these negative ways. Before we really get into the rest of the sermon, though, there's one point I want to make, and that's about cursing. If you look at the chart, the original chart came from Barnes Bible Charts, and it looks kind of like this. And some of you shared it on Facebook. That's where I got it from. I've had this for years. I have all his charts downloaded on my computer. He does a really good work with these charts. He has some great Old Testament and New Testament things. Great Bible resource. If you don't know where to find it, let me know. I'll help you get that address. But the very first one on there is cursing. And the reason I didn't include that is because if you notice all these things up here, if you can see it, they have a Bible verse under it, except for that one. Because, and I'm not here to say that cursing is okay. There's ways we can disprove it, but this lesson is to go to single verses and identify exactly what it says regarding that. And I got to thinking about it as I looked to it. Cursing is normally the number one thing we go against. That we'll sit there and be quick. Don't you talk like that. Don't you use that filthy language. And we shouldn't. Because we ought to be pure and holy. It's the right, you can't curse and have the right heart and the attitude. But we kind of have to go circumvent around explaining how and why we're not supposed to be using certain words. Because the word itself, depending on the time and the usage, there were times that word might not have been considered a bad word. It's the usage through time. But it's the heart behind it. And so the reason I bring this up is, isn't it amazing how quick we will be about a word, like a curse word, but how quick we will take these other 17 things and accept them and not call people out on it? Because we will take evil speaking or flattery or lying or tale-bearing whispers, backbiting and boasting, as we discussed this morning, and we accept that, and we can hear that, and we won't say anything to somebody about those things, but you let them have a bad word come out of your mouth, and we'll be, what you say? We don't use language like that here. And as I meditated upon these things, wouldn't it be great if us as Christians, if a one is caught in error, supposed to restore such a one, we are supposed to help each other if we're found in error. Wouldn't it be great if we had one of these things other than the cuss words? Put that on the side for a second. When one of these other things, a lie or a whisper or a gossip, say, "What'd you say?" We don't talk that way around here. We don't use language like that. And it's not to make light of bad words. Don't use those words. But y'all, these words that we've been discussing today in our lessons are just as bad. Because these words will cause yourself to be lost for eternity. So we want to avoid lying, evil speaking, flattery, talebearing, whispers, backbiting, and boasting. And we're going to notice 9 through 17 with the rest of this lesson. And so we'll go through these hopefully pretty quickly. Deceit. Romans chapter 3, beginning in verse 13, their throat is an open sepulcher. With their tongues they have used deceit. The poison of asps is under their lips. And so you think of serpents within there. Now, open sepulchers. I don't think we consider this enough exactly what that would be. A sepulcher was a place to contain dead bodies, dead bones. And so if you think about a sepulcher being closed, in Scripture sometimes we talk about the whited sepulcher. The idea of somebody that on the outside portrays holiness, but upon the inside it's darkness. And so it says we're not to be whited sepulchers. But very seldom do you see in Scripture the idea of an open sepulcher. And so all of a sudden, think about if we went to a place where dead bodies were, and maybe for some of those that are literary people, if you think about the catacombs, and you think about the stench, the nastiness that must be in a sepulcher. And so it says their throat is an open sepulcher. It goes on, with their tongues they have used deceit. To deceive an individual is not right. We can go to the case of Abraham. A lot of people want to classify that under lying, and certainly it could be classified under lying. I would put it under more the idea of deceiving. And it's the heart of the righteous is one that wants truth, loves truth, wants to have truth in everything in life. And so lying would be an abomination. Lying would be wrong. But even the idea of deceiving another individual. Because we have Abraham that was fearful that he would enter into a country and they would see his wife Sarah. And feared that they would want her for his own wife, the king would. And so he says, well, tell them you're my sister. That was a half-truth. Because she was a half-sister to him in relationship. But it was displeasing to God because whenever the king, the leader, did see that Sarah was desirable, sent for her and had her in the court, in his courts, great tribulation and problems started to come upon him. And he wanted to know why Abraham would lie and deceive him. See, deceiving is not what we're supposed to be doing. We have truth come from our lips. We want to be the individuals, and this goes back to the idea of lying as well, that when we speak, somebody can take our word for what we say. I asked an individual years ago about somebody else. Because this person says, oh yeah, you can call Buck Roberts. But ask Buck Roberts about me. He'll tell you about me. So I called Buck Roberts, and I said, hey, Buck. Oh, so-and-so told me to check with you about him. He said he knows you and says that you can vouch for him. He said, yeah. He said, if it's midnight and he says the sun's shining, you can believe him. Huh. I hadn't really ever heard that expression before, but it was to testify to this as a man that speaks truth. That you can take his word for something. You think about today in the world we live in. You ever notice how if you go to buy a car, I hope you exercise your wrist before you go. Because you're going to have to sign form after form after form. And all those contracts and forms and documents you're signing is because there are so many people in this world that are not truthful. They will deceive. They will lie. They're cheating still. But how many times will they deceive? You always hear about that car salesman that will roll act the odometer. I don't know if that's really possible or not. I've seen one car trip over 999,000 miles one time. Not mine, but somebody else's. And they went back to zero before the age of digital. I was curious what would happen if you ever tried to sell that vehicle. But you have to, when you sign the back of a title, there's something you sign that says that that the odometer is accurate reading to the best of your knowledge. Why is that there? Because so many people are deceiving. Don't let it be said of you that you'd be one to use your words to deceit. Reviling words, 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 10. Nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. I want to include a little bit of the next one with that one as we discussed it, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 4, and the idea of foolish talking. He goes on and says, neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not convenient, but rather giving of thanks. Now the second part of that verse is why I want to include these together. Our words in the positive sense would be those that are convenient, which means appropriate for the occasion, and giving of thanks. Not those that can rile people up, not those of complaining, not those of bitterness, not those of foolishness, but those words that are appropriate. Sometimes students will get talking and they get to joking around, and then there's always one student in particular they'll go after, and they say, now look, you need to be quiet. You're taking this too far. And what they're trying to explain is the appropriateness of words. We're going to notice here a minute, let's notice these next several. And I'll make my comments regarding all of them. Ephesians 5:4, that we just noticed the idea of jesting. Some could say that joking could mean that as well. But what's important is really Matthew 12:36 and the idea of idle words. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. If you take reviling words, foolish talking, jesting, and you combine all those, you're really dealing with the idea of idleness. You have an opportunity to use your words for good. One of the songs we sang was talking about that we have opportunity. Because we have words of life that are here that we can share with other people. And you ever think about some of the idle words that we use, some of the jokes that we tell? I like a good joke as much as I like the next person, as the next person likes them. I can enjoy them. And sometimes foolish talking will start taking place. But those idle words, what good are they doing? You only have so many words, so many hours, so many minutes, so many seconds to live in this world. Could we use those moments to speak words that are of value? Use this as a comparison. I'm not a real health nut, but they talk about calories. And I figured out that if I ever want to lose weight, I can lose weight by counting calories. If I count my calories, I can lose weight. I can eat whatever I want to. I might only get one piece of cake for the day and to stay in my calories, but I'll go hungry. But if I stay under my calorie intake, I can normally lose weight. But I'm one that gets hungry. That's my biggest problem. And so what I've learned is there's a lot of empty calories out there. I can eat, if I'm allowed 3,000, there's things that eat up those 3,000. They don't really do anything for me. But then there's other foods that I can eat that use those calories up, but they give me nutrition. They give me value. So when I count my calories, I say, I want to make this count. I want to make this worth something. Because I only have so many calories in a day. You only have so many hours in a day. You only have so many words to say in a day. Now, do you want those words to be foolish, jesting, reviling words that are idle, or do you want them to mean something? Another comparison of this would be a car. You ever idle your car because you want your car to be warm, maybe? When I drove charter bus, that was one of the big things is if you ever buy a charter bus, you want to look at your engine idle hours because that means a lot. That bus might have a 500,000 miles upon it, but its engine idle hours may be astronomical. And so when we'd go somewhere, the owner of the company was always telling us, now look, if you're going to be shut down for about an hour, cut that engine off. I don't want it idling. Well, there's wear and tear on the motor, but in particular, it was sucking diesel fuel that was costing him money. So if he was paying for diesel to go in there, he wanted it to make it go down the road, not just to be sitting there idling, doing nothing. So if we're going to sit here using our words, don't we want them to do something? Sometimes we could sit there and realize in this world of why I don't want to be wasteful whenever it comes to gas, or why we don't want to be wasteful whenever it comes to lights. If you go to the house right now, you perhaps have idle lights on. Lights that are left on and they're not doing anything for you. That always bothered my mother. So she said, those are pennies dropping. Just imagine pennies dropping. And made a mistake one day, tell her to put a bucket down. But I shouldn't have said that. That was wrong. And she taught me that that was the wrong thing to say. That was disrespectful. See, wrong words. Prime example. And so we don't like idleness. So in the same time that you could be using your words in all these wrong ways, we have the same opportunity to encourage somebody else. The same effort it takes to pick up a phone and call somebody in order to whisper, gossip, to give them a hard time, to do foolish talking, it's the same words we could be using to encourage them, let them know that we appreciate them. To give them, to say, you know, I appreciate what you do, or I know that you've been sick lately. Is there something I can do for you? Hey, I'm praying for you. Let's not have idle words. We keep going. There are words that can be used that are displeasing to God when it's blasphemy. Colossians 3 and verse 8, but now ye also put off all these anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. When we think about this, blasphemy means to go against. If we're speaking of it in speech, it means to speak against. Closely related to this, we got in this discussion on the way. Liam looked it up for me. If it's teaching that it goes against, it would be heresy that we could talk about. But in this passage, it's blasphemy. And for people to deny God, to deny His teaching, is blasphemous. And it is a shame today that so many people use their words in this way. Whether it's in radio and television, whether it's talking at work, whether it's talking to neighbors, to deny God and to speak against Him is displeasing to Him. Why would we use our words in such fashion? False teaching would be another way. In James, if we remember in chapter 3 and verse 1, it says, be not many masters, knowing this, that ye shall receive the greater condemnation. Then he goes on in the verses that follow in order to explain about the danger of the tongue. I heard one speaker one time trying to explain away why the division was wrong there, and that really belonged with the previous. I disagree with it. I believe the letter was one that flowed fluidly. And the positioning in verse 1 in chapter 3, remember those weren't there originally, but that positioning is perfect because when you flow, what do we teach with? I know we can show by example, but in this, it's talking about the things that we say. And we'll give account to those. Titus chapter 1, verse 10 through 11, for there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers. Notice that with the idea of deceit that we noticed earlier. Especially they are of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teaching things they ought not, for filthy lucre's sake. And that's the idea, for their own gain's sake, for what they get out of it, they teach things that are false. That's why we need to be like those in Berea that were more noble than those of Thessalonica, searching the Scriptures daily, seeing whether these things were so. Because there are a lot of people that will say anything and everything just to their own advantage, including false teaching. And I've heard some stuff, and it just amazes me. And sometimes a person can be sincere in the teaching that they're giving, but still be wrong. And that's why we must examine constantly what we're teaching. Is it truth? Let me add one more thing on that. And sometimes it's not just false teaching. But I think about the words that I've used in teaching at times. And I go back especially in the very early years of the Bible studies that I would conduct. You know, I was sincere. I was doing the best I could at the time. But I look back on those times and I wish I could go back now and redo those Bible studies, because I'd be so much better at it today. Well, sometimes it needs to be the attitude, not about, that I'm a false teacher here, but I want to be the best I can to use my words in the best way possible, because this may be the only opportunity somebody has to hear the gospel. And I want to use my words just the best way possible to try and reach them. We noticed the other next point earlier in filthy speech in Colossians 3 and verse 8. I believe this is where really you come in under the idea of cursing, by the way, and the filthiness. And this can be the subject matter in which we're speaking. And I know there's a lot of things upon television that it's open to talk about and it's conveyed, but y'all, that's just not appropriate. I've heard preachers preach upon some things that just not appropriate in that setting. There are some things that maybe the older women need to be teaching the younger women in certain settings, and the older men need to be teaching younger men in certain settings. And there's some things that just shouldn't be joked about, and we need to be concerned about, is our speech pure versus being filthy? We noticed this passage earlier that we put the filthy communication out of your mouth. You ever had that person that you called a potty mouth? And young people, listen to me real quick. Saying bad words don't make you appear to be more mature, smart. It actually shows your ignorance. And I'm not trying to be ugly to you when I say that. I speak from a background at one point in time I thought, that made me older. If I use those words like they used on TV. That doesn't. Grab a dictionary and find some good words to use. And there's nothing like if you were going to have to scold somebody to use a word that they have to go look it up. Alan Adams knew how to do that to us. He'd come in, get on to us in class, and I didn't know if it was a compliment or an insult until I went and got a dictionary. And I'm not saying you always want to insult somebody, but if you're in defense of yourself and you got to give them a good comeback, using these four-letter words and it doesn't show you to be smart, intelligent. It doesn't show you to be mature. It just shows your ignorance. It shows a potty mouth. It shows somebody that doesn't give themselves to righteousness. Talk about regret, y'all. I wish I'd go back to high school and do a lot of things over again. And the way I use my words would be one of them. So to the young people, if I could tell you anything, don't let filthy communication come out of your mouth. Crooked speech. Some of these are closely related, but he lists them as separate, and we're going to keep them that way. Proverbs 4:24, put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. That crookedness, perverseness within there. We've made comment on that for a second time. We're going to keep moving. But harsh criticism. Perhaps this can be one of the hardest sometimes. Matthew 5:22, but I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council, but whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. This is proceeding in the early part of the Sermon on the Mount, to where later in Matthew 7, verse 1 and following, we'll talk of the warning given about judging other people. The reason harsh criticism is bad is because it stands in the way of treating other people the way we want to be treated, being able to love, being able to encourage, being able to help. Now, if I put all these words, and I didn't have time to finish it, I was going to put all these words up there in a different chart than this one, but if I put all those words before you, what you're going to see is that you cannot use these words or use these your words in these ways and love your fellow man. Remember Matthew, whenever it records for us the words of Jesus, that the second greatest command is to love your fellow man. The greatest command is to love God. You can't use your word for blasphemous things and love your fellow man. You can't whisper, you can't gossip, you can't backbite, you can't do foolish talking, you can't sit there and deceive, you can't be a talebearer, you can't lie, you can't give harsh criticism, you can't do any of these things and do them in love, following after God. So we start asking ourselves, how am I using my words? I hope you ask yourself that, because what we'll find is we may be a whole lot quieter. The second thing is we'll find ourselves being a whole lot more productive. Because sometimes we may just shut our mouths and get busy to work. Or we'll decide, hey, I want to use my words in a positive way that's encouraging to other people, teaching other people, helping other people. I shared with you different illustrations and stories about all this type of stuff. But I think about the people that have helped me the most in this world are people that were compassionate, that were understanding, encouraging, that were teaching. And how did they do that in my life? By the words that they used. It's through their words. There's power within that word. That's why we crave the freedoms that we enjoy, like the freedom of speech. That's why we can talk that the pen is mightier than the sword. Because these words are powerful and we can use them, and you have every day you wake up a choice. Do I send forth sweet words or do I send forth bitter words? I pray that you will use this lesson to challenge you. Don't use them in the ways we've been talking about, but use them in ways of encouragement and teaching and admonition and compassion towards your fellow man. Let me give you a couple final illustrations of this. You go to work tomorrow, and there's the person that's harsh and critical of you. You have a choice. You have a choice. They may come in, and they may sit there and say, well, I noticed you weren't early today. No, I wasn't. How are you doing today? It's a nice way to de-escalate the situation, isn't it? Or they might sit there and complain. They could sit there and say, you know what, that boss we have, they're awful. I tell you what, they don't know what it's like to be out here, let's say you work in the hospital floor. They don't remember what it's like to be out here on the hospital floor. Tell you, they're sitting in their office and they just got it cushy. They just don't know. Now you have a choice, don't you? Because you can join in. Let me tell you, that is an awful boss. And you start going and you're doing what? You're backbiting, right? Or you can sit there and say, you know, I bet you there's things that they have, that challenges they face that we don't even know about. I'm just going to do my job and do the best I can at it. That'd be a way to be positive, wouldn't it? Your neighbor can be harsh to you. Neighbors can say some ugly things sometimes. And sometimes you can receive criticism. And one of the best things I learned in law enforcement, when somebody just was ugly to you and they just yelled at you and screamed at you, because for some reason, every person we came into contact with, it seemed like, remind us that they paid our salary. And so I worked for them. Okay. And they would yell at me, and I learned to say, look at them and say, well, thank you. I'll remember that. I appreciate that. Not being smart to them, but just take the criticism, thank them for it, and go on. What would happen if I yelled at them back? What would happen if I criticized them? If I used one of those things on that chart? It'd only make the matter worse. Tomorrow when you go to school, you decide, Do you want to talk about that person that's being picked on, join into that crowd that's being the bully, or do you want to be the one that decides to go to that person and encourage them, to uplift them? See, these are the practical, everyday illustrations, examples that we face. And you'll have a choice. I pray that we'll choose to always use our words in a way that'll be pleasing to God. But it really starts with deciding whether or not you're going to live your life for Him. That's what we're here for. That's what we want. There's no doubt in my mind that if you're here tonight on a Sunday evening, there's other things that you could be doing, but you're here because you want to be pleasing to God. And if you haven't come in faith, repent of your sins, confessing Christ, being baptized, then you need to come tonight and do so. What are you waiting on? Jesus died for you to be saved, and He's told us in His Word that's what we need to do. We're here to assist you in that if you need to take those steps. If you're an erring child of God and you need the prayers of encouragement, prayers for forgiveness, then we're here to help you as well. I love the song we sing. I believe I tell you this frequently, but I'm going to keep telling it to you for a long time to come, as long as you keep me. I love the invitation song. Because when the invitation song is sung, it's voices to sing, to encourage you that if you need to make your life right with God, to come, not to be judged, not to be ridiculed, but to be encouraged, and us to help you make your life right with God as together we stand and sing.